Okay, imagine this for a second. The first person who's going to live to 150 years old, they've apparently already been born.
Mm-hmm.
It's a statement that really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? Challenges how we usually perceive aging, longevity.
Oh, absolutely. It shifts it from some, far-off sci-fi idea to something that could actually be happening, well, right now.
In that reality, that's really setting the stage for what we want to dig into today.
Right, this massive global demographic shift that's underway.
Mhm.
We're talking about a future where older populations aren't just growing in number,
Yeah.
but they're actually transforming economies, societies in ways we're frankly only just starting to figure out.
Which is exactly why we're doing this deep dive into longevity hubs today. We're leaning heavily on this really fascinating book, Longevity Hubs, Regional Innovation for Global Aging, by Joseph Coughlin and Luke Quinto.
Good stuff in there.
Yeah, it is. And our mission really is to unpack what these hubs actually are, why they seem to be popping up right now, and, what surprising insights they offer us about where we're all headed.
Mm-hmm.
We want to give you, the listener, a bit of a shortcut to understanding this really vital global trend. Help you see past the kind of old stereotypes about aging.
Yeah, get beyond that.
And uncover the real economic and social opportunities that are actually lying there.
It really is an unprecedented shift. It's driven by something called the demographic transition.
Yeah.
Basically, this rapid worldwide drop in both death rates and birth rates.
Right.
And here's the thing that's really crucial now. This isn't just a quote-unquote rich country issue anymore.
Okay.
Countries like China, India, with these enormous populations, they're the ones projected to really drive global aging trends going forward.
It's kind of sobering when you think about the numbers. Like in 2021, about 1 in 10 people worldwide were 65 or over.
Mm-hmm.
But by 2050, that's projected to be 1 in 6.
1 in 6.
That's a rapid shift. It really speaks volumes about how urgent this trend is becoming.
And it's not just about the sheer numbers, the scale of it.
Yeah.
It has these really profound human and economic stakes.
How so?
Well, this kind of demographic shift, it can put immense pressure on social systems, things like pensions, state retirement funds.
Sure.
And it just creates this growing need for completely new kinds of services. We've seen the tensions, right? Like the recent protests in France over changing the retirement age.
Yes, that was big news.
But the book, it really makes a point of framing this not just as a problem we have to manage somehow,
Right.
but actually as a powerful catalyst, a driver for innovation.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how often we seem to overlook the sheer financial power of older adults.
Totally.
The sources call them a hidden giant, but when you look at the data, they're right there in plain sight.
Oh, absolutely. The data brings it right into focus. I mean, take the U.S., for example.
Mm-hmm.
The 50-plus population. They account for a remarkable 46% of the national GDP.
Almost half.
Almost half. And they hold 83% of all household wealth. That was back in 2018.
83%.
Globally, this 50-plus group, they make up half of all consumer spending.
Half.
And 34% of global GDP. And that figure is projected to more than double, maybe to $45 trillion by 2050.
Wow.
And then there's this. An estimated $48 trillion, with a T, in wealth transfer is expected in the U.S. alone in the next 25 years.
Okay, that's just an astonishing amount of economic power.
It is. It's a powerful, often really underestimated economic force.
So what does that tell us then about the blind spots maybe in how businesses, governments, how they typically view this demographic, and what kind of, radical shifts are needed to really tap into this hidden giant?
Well, it signals, I think, a need for a complete reevaluation. We hear these stereotypes all the time, right?
Yeah.
Older adults as just takers or, a drain on resources.
Mm-hmm.
But the data just profoundly challenges that idea. It shows them as incredibly active economic players, not just consumers, but vital producers too.
Okay, so beyond just spending money, what are some of maybe the most surprising ways the book shows their economic contributions, especially you mentioned their role in the workforce, maybe that entrepreneurial spirit?
Yeah, well, first, their labor force participation, it's actually been going up steadily since the 1980s, which kind of runs counter to some common narratives, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
But here's something truly eye-opening. Apparently, half of all new businesses are started by people over 50.
Half? Really?
Half. And get this, they're twice as likely to succeed compared to businesses started by younger entrepreneurs.
Wow, that completely flips the script on the typical startup image.
Right. It highlights this really powerful, often untapped entrepreneurial drive within this demographic.
And then beyond the formal economy, the sort of paid work, the book points to this huge, often invisible value of unpaid contributions.
Yes.
Can you maybe unpack that a bit? What does that actually look like, and why is it so critical to this whole longevity economy picture?
Oh, this is a massive area. Look, nearly 1/5 of American caregivers for older adults are themselves over 65.
Okay, so older adults caring for even older adults.
Exactly. And then childcare grandparents provide a staggering 80% of primary childcare for families who rely on relatives.
80%, that's huge.
It's immense. And the value of all this unpaid care work, it's estimated to be worth about 10% of global GDP. Just massive.
That paints a picture of, well, incredible, often invisible stress for so many families, doesn't it? It makes you wonder how we've kind of let this go or underaddressed for so long. Does the book suggest this is maybe reaching a breaking point?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that hidden burden brings us right to a critical challenge.
Yeah.
The caregiving crisis.
Right.
Family caregivers, they often face just immense challenges, spending on average something like $7,000 a year out of pocket, often with very little support.
$7,000.
Yeah. And it disproportionately affects women. 2/3 of informal caregivers in the U.S. are women, and they spend about 50% more time doing it than men do. And for Hispanic and Latino caregivers specifically, they often spend almost half of their entire income on these caregiving activities.
That's unsustainable for people.
It really is. And then compounding all this is this declining caregiver support ratio.
What's that?
It's basically the number of potential caregivers, usually defined as people aged 45 to 64, for every person aged 80 and over. Between 1990 and 2010, that ratio is about 7 to 1.
Okay.
By 2050, it's projected to be just 3 to 1.
So fewer people available to care for a growing number of very old adults.
Precisely. It creates this undeniable widening innovation gap. We need solutions.
Yeah. And speaking of innovation gaps, it's interesting that the book notes many products historically designed for older people have, well, kind of failed.
They have, yeah. The sources call it the big, beige, and boring problem.
Big, beige, and boring. It's
Yeah.
such a perfect description, isn't it?
It really is.
It highlights just how kind of off base some of those product approaches have been. But the book suggests there's a much smarter way forward. So that disconnect you mentioned between how people see themselves and how they're categorized externally, how does that fundamentally shift how we should be designing things? Not just avoiding beige, but in terms of like the underlying purpose.
Well, it taps into a really powerful psychological insight.
Right.
Only about 35% of people over 75 actually feel old.
Right. Age is just a number, as they say.
Exactly. So if a product looks and feels like it's explicitly for old people, it often carries this stigma.
Yeah.
And people reject it because it just clashes with their self-image. It also often ignores the mental models people already have. Like they mentioned this BMW joystick interface.
Oh, yeah.
It looked like a computer mouse, but didn't behave like one. And it just frustrated older drivers who had existing expectations about how controls should work.
So the solution isn't just making more old person products then.
No, not at all.
Instead, the book introduces this really interesting concept. They call them stealth products. What does that mean exactly? And why do they seem to work so much better?
Stealth products are basically solutions that aren't explicitly marketed for older adults, but they just happen to meet their needs really well, almost serendipitously.
Okay, like what?
Think about the Apple Watch, the fall detection feature. It's activated by default for users over 55.
Right, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it becomes this highly effective personal emergency response system, a PERS.
Like those pendants.
Exactly, but without any of the old person stigma, because it's just a cool, widely adopted gadget that people of all ages use.
Okay.
We're also seeing it with hearing aids, They're starting to blur the line with fancy in-ear headphones or earbuds.
Ah, making them more discreet, more mainstream.
Precisely.
And this isn't actually a new idea, is it? The book mentions historical examples.
No, it's not new at all. Things like electric garage door openers, microwave ovens, even text messaging.
Text messaging. How so?
Well, initially, maybe not designed for older folks, but think about how useful it is for someone with hearing loss, or just for quick, simple communication. They weren't designed specifically for older adults, but they turned out to be incredibly useful.
That makes sense.
Even things today like gig economy services, Uber, Instacart, they effectively unbundle traditional senior housing services, right? Offering transportation, grocery delivery, convenience, without the whole institutional package.
That's a great point. It's about function over label.
Exactly. And this whole approach it seems to thrive on and benefit from intergenerational connections,
Oh, okay.
which in turn also naturally fuel innovation and just improve quality of life all around.
Hmm.
Think about like cultural examples, Lady Gaga and Tony Bennett collaborating,
Right. Classic example.
or that HBO show Hacks, which explores the generational divide between a young comedy writer and an older comedian with, humor and real insight.
Yeah, I've heard good things about that. And then there's a podcast too, right? 70 over 70?
Mm-hmm. Where a 41-year-old host interviews people over 70, it highlights the power of just having these cross-generational conversations.
There's also that MIT incubated platform Nesterly.
Yes, Nesserly, connecting older homeowners who have spare rooms with younger people, often students who need affordable housing. It's brilliant.
It is.
And there's a place called Lessell Village in Newton, Massachusetts. Really a remarkable model. Residents there are actually required to complete 450 hours of education every year.
Required. Wow.
Yeah. But it's not just about learning for its own sake. It fosters this incredible reciprocal learning environment. The older residents often share their decades of knowledge and experience with younger university students from the affiliating college.
So it's a two-way street.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A beautiful example of generations really benefiting from each other in a structured, innovative way.
So we've talked about all this incredible innovation happening, these sort of stealth solutions, the intergenerational power. But how do these scattered efforts kind of come together into something bigger, something really transformative?
Yeah, that's the question.
Our sources point to this powerful underlying structure that seems to define the successful longevity hubs. It's this idea of economic clusters.
That's right. It draws on ideas from economists like Alfred Marshall, strategists like Michael Porter. The basic idea of a cluster is these interconnected groups of companies, suppliers, related institutions, all in the same geographic area.
Okay.
And the proximity, the networks, they foster innovation. The sources argue that really succeeding in this longevity economy could become a new source of national competitive advantage.
Like Silicon Valley for tech.
Exactly. But for aging.
But it's not just about the businesses themselves, though, right? What are the key ingredients that really make a longevity hub, well, tick?
Right, it's broader than just firms.
Yeah.
The crucial factors seem to be talent, obviously, access to capital, cutting-edge research, robust government support is often key, and really strong community engagement. And academic institutions play this pivotal role.
How so?
They often act as the conveners, bringing people together. And they develop the specialized workforce needed for this evolving economy. They're critical in putting aging on the map for young entrepreneurs, for investors, kind of bridging that gap between the lab bench and the market need.
Okay, so we have the theory, the ingredients. Let's turn to practice. Where are these fascinating longevity hubs actually taking shape already? What unique flavors of innovation are popping up around the globe?
All right, let's do a bit of a world tour.
Yeah, get ready. We'll start close to home, relatively speaking, Boston, often called the Silicon Valley of longevity. Is that fair?
Well, Boston certainly has a strong claim. It leverages its, established strengths in biotech, robotics, healthcare, finance. It's got all those pieces.
Right.
And you see initiatives like the Governor's Council on Aging, incubators like HNCY. They're actively trying to build this ecosystem, nurture new companies and solutions specifically for aging.
And what about that group, the Founders Over 55 Collective, F55 Plus SARE? That sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's a great example. It's a group of older entrepreneurs who are directly challenging those ageist stereotypes you often find in the startup world. They're proving it can be done.
Good for them.
Boston also offers kind of a historical lesson. Remember the old rivalry between Route 128 and Silicon Valley?
Vaguely, yeah.
The lesson there was about the need for a shared narrative, a common vision to really foster collaboration and stop things from getting too fragmented. That seems relevant for aging innovation, too.
Okay, so moving south from Boston, Louisville comes up. Why Louisville?
Louisville stands out particularly for healthcare innovation.
Yeah.
It has this long history as a major center for aging care businesses. Humana, for instance, was founded there way back in 1961.
Ah, okay. Deep roots.
Deep roots.
Yeah.
And more recently, their focus has really expanded into health equity. They're driven by trying to address significant local disparities in income and chronic disease within their population.
So that positions them kind of uniquely to tackle those foundational healthcare needs for an aging population, maybe especially for vulnerable groups.
Exactly. It's a different angle than pure tech, maybe.
Fascinating how different places focus on different aspects. Now, let's jump across the Pacific to Japan. You mentioned earlier their rapid aging, but also population centralization. How has that spurred innovation, particularly in these sort of urban satellite cities?
Yeah, Japan's situation is quite unique. You see places like Okinawa, which is home to OIST, the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology. They're combining top-tier research with a really pleasant environment to attract global talent focused on aging.
Okay.
Then there's Awaji Island, where you have examples like an 88-year-old woman, Akiko Nakagawa, becoming an Airbnb superhost. It just shows how older adults are actively participating in, the sharing economy there.
That's good.
Kamakura has a living lab exploring telework tech,
Hmm.
which is obviously huge for enabling older people to work flexibly or stay connected. And Karuizawa has become this really attractive, well-connected spot for older residents.
And what ties these satellite places together?
Really robust transport infrastructure and, crucially, advanced telework infrastructure. It enables this kind of decentralized model of innovation, spreading it beyond just Tokyo.
Interesting. Okay, from Japan, let's hop over to Europe. Milan comes up as a potential European hub, especially given Italy's demographics.
Right. Italy is, by percentage of older adults, Europe's oldest major economy.
Wow.
And Italian seniors, they own about 40% of the country's private wealth. So significant financial power there.
Definitely.
Milan is seeing an emerging market for senior housing, and they're also developing these interesting new corporate welfare programs.
Like what?
Well, one example is Milan's municipal transport company, ATM. They started offering kindergartens not just for workers' kids, but for their grandkids, too.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah.
Supporting the whole family ecosystem.
Exactly. Recognizing that caring for grandkids can be a huge factor in an older worker's life, or even for younger workers whose parents are helping out.
Very insightful. Okay, staying in Europe, let's jump to the UK. Newcastle. What's our story? The book mentions collaborative resilience.
Yeah, Newcastle's interesting because it has this really long history, going back decades, of collaborative efforts across public sector, private companies, universities, NGOs. It was driven initially by pioneering dementia research that started way back in the 1960s.
So a long-term
A
focus.
very long-term focus. And that collaborative spirit led to the creation of NICA, the National Innovation Center for Aging, located at their Helix campus. It's designed to be this global resource for aging innovation, really focused on translating research into commercial products and services.
Okay, impressive history there. Now let's head to Latin America. São Paulo in Brazil. It seems to have a unique, maybe more grassroots approach.
It does, yeah. Brazil is aging very rapidly, and São Paulo showcases something they call Economia da Gambiarra.
Economia da...
Gambiarra. It basically translates sort of to a make-do or DIY economy. It's this grassroots sharing economy that thrives on creative, often improvised solutions to meet everyday needs. And that kind of ingenuity naturally benefits older adults who might need adaptable solutions. Alongside that, you have academic efforts like FTC Longevity and this really significant research initiative called the Tsunami 8 LATAM study.
What's that?
It's this groundbreaking collaborative project uniting researchers from several Latin American countries to study longevity, focusing specifically on their unique regional challenges and demographics.
Very cool. Collaboration across borders there.
Yeah.
Now, for maybe outsized tech impact relative to size, we often look to Israel, Tel Aviv.
Absolutely. Israel, despite being a small country, has made really disproportionate contributions to AgeTech.
Why is that, do you think?
It seems to be rooted in this combination of a long history of strong care traditions. There's an organization called JDC Eshel that's been focused on social services and elder care for ages,
Okay.
combined with its renowned world-class tech innovation scene, which gets strong backing from the Israeli Innovation Authority.
And any standout examples?
A prime one is ELIQ. It's a social robot designed for older adults. In a New York State program, it apparently reduced feelings of loneliness for 80% of the users.
80%. That's real impact.
Huge impact, yeah. Demonstrating how tech can address social and emotional needs, too.
Incredible. Okay, one more stop on our tour. Dubai. Their approach seems quite different. Again, very top-down.
Very top-down, yes. Dubai's government has taken this extremely proactive stance. They have this stated goal to be the world's best place for older adults by 2071.
That's ambitious.
Very ambitious. And they're leveraging the country's wealth and its existing culture of, rapid development and innovation to try and achieve that. They're actively looking to attract and serve an aging population, including an expected influx of retirees and older expats thanks to new visa rules.
So a very planned, centralized model of building a longevity hub.
Pretty much, yeah. It's an interesting contrast to some of the more organic ones.
Right. It really is. And then sort of tying all these different global efforts together, the book mentions Aging 2.0. What role does that play? Is it like a hub for the hubs?
That's actually a great way to put it, a meta-longevity hub.
Okay.
Aging 2.0 is essentially a global network. Its whole purpose is to accelerate AgeTech, technology for aging. It does that by connecting startups, big corporations, investors, researchers, policymakers all around the world.
So breaking down silos.
Exactly. It's crucial because, great innovations are happening everywhere in all these different hubs we've talked about,
Yeah.
but often without much transparency or connection between them.
Right. People reinventing the wheel.
Potentially, yeah. So Aging 2.0 really acts as this global pipeline for aging innovation, trying to make sure that good ideas and solutions can scale, learn from each other, and spread more quickly.
Okay. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive then, it feels abundantly clear that this silver tsunami, as it's often called, it's not just some challenge we have to brace for.
No, not at all.
It's actually this massive, multifaceted opportunity for innovation, for economic growth across, well, pretty much every sector imaginable.
It really is. And it's more than just an economic thing, isn't it? It's about fundamentally rethinking how we design our societies. The potential for new products, new services, new policies that genuinely improve quality of life for older adults and, honestly, by extension, for all generations. It's just immense.
Yeah.
This is really about creating a future where everyone can thrive, truly thrive, at every single stage of life.
So we really hope this discussion, this deep dive, maybe encourages you, the listener, to think about the transformative role you could play in this evolving landscape.
Yeah.
How might you apply some of this knowledge, these insights, maybe in your own community or in your work, perhaps by looking for those stealth product opportunities we talked about?
Or fostering those intergenerational connections.
Exactly.
Because ultimately, this race to innovate for aging, it isn't just about, getting ahead economically or one country beating another.
Yeah.
It's really about ensuring a higher quality of life for everyone as our populations age globally. It's kind of a race against time, in a way, for a better, more inclusive future, a future where those 150-year-olds among us can actually flourish.